Spacefarer. What the UFO? I'm Caleb. This show is about UFOs. We have interesting conversations with serious people who are thinking deeply about the subject. I just want to start by thanking everybody who's supporting us. Everyone on Patreon, everyone on YouTube, everyone who's sending us well wishes. It's really huge. It's actually kind of super important. Making this show is expensive. I do it for free. In fact, I spend money making this show. I pay for the hosting and the podcast and the editing software and now the communication software because it looks better when I pay money for it. But that means that I actually spend money making this show. Every episode makes me negative money. So I do it because I care about the subject. I want to help broaden the conversation around it. I want to normalize the topic. I want to get everybody curious about it in a broad way. I know that's happening on a much bigger scale than me. I'm just one little droplet in the tide, but it matters to me. And I think you're probably here because it matters to you. So if you're here watching a repeated episode and you're already a fan, or if you just like the cut of my jib so much that you're on board already, please support the show at patreon.com/WTUFO or by clicking around on YouTube and finding our membership option there. It's like $1 or $2 a month, not asking for a lot of money, but it would make the show net zero, at least, to produce for me. And ideally, it would be net positive, and maybe I could promote it and grow it a little bit, which would help broaden the conversation. Point is, this is not a grift. I'm not here to make a whole bunch of money. I'm just here to help the conversation, but I need your help to keep this going. So if you like the show, please support us on WTUFO at Patreon or the YouTube membership right here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can even support us on Buzzsprout if you're listening on some podcast player. There are ways. So just like find me, reach out, contribute $1 or $2 a month. It would mean so much to the show. Like it would maybe mean the difference between the show not existing anymore and the show continuing to exist. Not trying to like hold a gun to the head of the show, but like, I'm not sure I can keep paying money into the void forever. I could really use your help. I know there are a few hundred out there of you who watch this show regularly. That would be enough to make the show regularly in the black. We could even get some more audience in here and then like have more fun growing our conversation together. You can also meet in the community section of the YouTube show, and we can talk there. There are options for chats that now exist. It's kind of new. I'm having fun with it. I like having conversations with people in the comments, but now we have a community. We can do it there too. Not trying to gatekeep, and I really don't want to sell anybody any private episodes because I want public open access for all this stuff. I think we should all have public access to all this information and to this fascinating conversation because it's happening in an important moment in the inflection of human history and human future. So that's the spiel. Thank you very much for watching and supporting the show. Thank you so much to the people who are already supporting. And if you're watching repeatedly and you're not supporting yet, please help us make this show continue. Thank you so much. Okay, specifically for this episode, I also want to say one thing. I had a great time in this conversation with Brenda, and I wanted to add one more detail that she shared with me after we recorded, which is I asked a little bit offline about the politics of the Jinn, because we get into the Jinn here, mystical, mystery, spirit creatures, and she told me that her reading suggests that the Jinn exist in something like a society, that they have or had, at least historically, tribes of some kind, that there are social groups within the Jinn. And I just thought that was a fascinating little detail. We didn't get as far as politics. I don't know if they're like democratically electing anybody or if there's like a head Jinn or if it's like a sort of an anarchic tribal community. But her answer on this question of social structure around the Jinn was that it was tribal, at least in the historic religious record. So I thought you might find that interesting. I found this conversation fascinating. I really like her curiosity about the spiritual aspects of the topic, as I know many of you are interested in as well. And once again, I just really appreciate you listening and watching, and I hope you're having a good time processing this information. I know it can get a little wild and big sometimes, and the next episode I'm going to do is like a big picture essay about where I am with processing all this, which I'd love to hear your thoughts about as well. But in the meantime, hop into the community on YouTube or the comments, wherever you're watching this. I guess, honestly, specifically YouTube is the best place to have conversations, but you can chat us on Patreon as well while you're there donating $1 or $2 a month. All right. Thank you so much. On with the show.
I used to think that we were in the larger reality and these other things were limited. Now it's the opposite. I think the other things may truly be reality and they occupy reality. And we're the ones in the bubble.
What the UFO? I'm here with Dr. Brenda Denzler. Brenda, it is great to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Caleb. I appreciate it.
I'm very excited to speak with you. We had a little offline collab where we ran through some really interesting stuff. To set the table a little bit, I should tell people that you have a Ph.D. in religion. I believe I have that right?
Studies, yes.
Okay. And you wrote a dissertation in 1998, you were telling me, which became a book. It was called UFOs and the Unknown, The Lure of the Edge.
Is that, the Lure of the Edge, Scientific Passions, Religious Beliefs, and the Pursuit of UFOs.
Okay. Well, so right off the bat, people can click over to Amazon and check that out. It's still a going concern and a well-respected volume in the industry, the industry of wonder.
Yes.
Well, congratulations and thank you for your contribution to the discourse, and especially for entering something serious into the record at a time when it was quite controversial still.
Yeah. I had to do a little bit of negotiating to be able to do it, but in the end, the negotiations all worked out. And then being given permission to write it was one thing. And then in the process of writing it, there were some times when my advisors were somewhat alarmed at things that I wrote. Like there's one paragraph in there about Roswell, and one of my advisors wanted me to take it completely out because talking about Roswell made me sound like too much of a believer. And I said, no, if you're going to write about the history of the UFO subculture, you can't not mention Roswell. There's nothing controversial about the fact that it happened. Exactly which events happened and which didn't, and what the meaning of it is, that's another issue. But I only talked about the events that nobody questioned, but my advisor questioned them.
I have to say, when I came to this subject, I brought with me the assumption that Roswell was silly, and I've gotten that picture muddied up a little bit in the years since. I'm not sure that I have really strong feelings about it today. One way or the other. I've been variously convinced of various things at various times.
Yeah, I think we'll finally know for sure, probably never. It's always going to be caked with uncertainty. And I don't think there's ever going to be any definitive statement about it that is going to satisfy everybody. There will always be people who say, no, that's, that's not the full truth. So in the end, I don't think we're ever going to know.
Yeah, maybe not. That gets to one of the interesting things I've been thinking about in this space that I want to bounce off you, which is just like, how do we think about trusting people's reports? Because a lot of the direct reports from people who were involved with Roswell are fantastic, like as in fantastical, like they sound unbelievable. And the question of how seriously to take them is real and alive.
Yeah, it definitely is. Excuse me while I shift position here. It's difficult to know who and what to trust. And I think having many people say similar things, people from different areas of life, different walks of life, who report much of the same thing. I was really skeptical about whether or not we actually had any crash retrievals. But at this point in time, there have been so many people from so many different directions say that we do have them that I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe we do. And I'm not 100% convinced. I haven't seen any for sure wreckage, but I tend to think we probably do. But you still, in this field, you have to have a large basket for interesting if true. And a lot of things have to be tossed into that basket. You can take them out and revise them, review them from time to time, and maybe move them off into the utter hogwash basket or the totally true, it really happened basket.
Yeah, or adjust their probability up. Like, well, now I've heard this from 2 sources or 3 sources or 4 sources. So before we get too far down the rabbit hole in any one direction, I'd like to set the table a little bit. The three big pictures that I've been thinking about are, what do we think is going on? What kind of insights do we have, and how are our minds evolving on that topic? What, if anything, should we do about it collectively, given what we know now? How should we respond or be building structures for the future? And the fun sort of final act can be, what kind of communication might we enterprise to undertake if we do think, in fact, there are other beings here with whom we could communicate? What should that look like? Should we try to reach out? And if so, how? But I also wanted to ping some of the things you and I spoke about offline, which include your interest in non-corporeal intelligence and possibly some of the crossovers with religious traditions. As specifically, I've heard you talk about the Jinn as like a really interesting area. So I'd love to double click on that and hear what you've been learning and exploring. And I also think we had some good conversation about what it's like to have good conversation in this space. We may not have to talk about that too explicitly. We can just try to model a good conversation. But
yes,
if anything comes up, we can flag it. And then something you left me with last time we spoke that I really rang for me was the question of what maturity looks like from a human standpoint. What does it mean for us to become mature in our thinking about this subject? So I hope our conversation will move us toward that today. Would you like to start with an overview of what you think is going on generally, what you think we can say confidently, and what you think is interesting if true, and how your vision may have changed in the past 20, 30 years?
Sure. When I wrote the book, I had a strong suspicion that what we were looking at might not be extraterrestrial. It might be from some other place that wasn't like the place that we occupy every day. I also suspected that there might be more than one thing going on, but we lacked the perceptual and the cognitive skills to be able to distinguish between all of the things. And so we lumped them all together as UFOs, when in fact there could be 2 or 3 different things going on, and that we are just failing to appreciate. At this point, I'm not a very strong supporter of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the ETH. It could be true, and I'm not saying it's definitely couldn't be, but I think it has a number of problems, and it doesn't respond to all of the facts. And we need to expand our perception of reality in order to understand more of what's going on in a way that's very similar when the scientific revolution, when the Enlightenment happened. It wasn't that people started living in a literally physically different world, and yet in some ways they did, because people learned to think about that world differently and respond to it and interact with it differently. And I think that same kind of shift is what's needed now in order to be able to understand more about what is going on with UFOs. I think one big piece of the puzzle is going to be having more scientific study done, and we need funding for that. It doesn't happen for free. And we need open access to all the data. We need open access to the data that has been collected so far by the various governments around the world. That would be a real download of information right there as a basis for academically trained scientists to be able to go through and evaluate and maybe find patterns that were not previously noted. So we need more science, funding for the science to do it. And then we need to be willing to take all the data, not just some of the data, and throw the rest of it away because it looks like it's noise. Maybe it's not noise. Maybe it's a part of the signal that we need to pay attention to. And then we need to be able to open our brains and think more broadly about the world that we inhabit.
Great start. Okay, I really strongly agree with your interest in getting better science about this. Part of that for me has come from low-key giving up that we're going to get anywhere governmentally with the military and intelligence community. I think they'll eventually cop to something when we prove to them that there's something publicly available. They'll say, okay, yeah, but we've got this. We have been on it. But I don't think they're going to step up on an empty Monday and just start talking.
But the only major sources of funding for science are the government, number one.
Yeah.
So the government still exercises a great deal of control over how this could move forward. Large corporations that have research and development arms, they can afford to pay for more funding, but you know that the information they get is not going to be open access.
Right.
They're going to be keeping it undercover and making it pay monetarily rather than sharing it for the broader good.
Yeah, you're right. So just to double click on this subject, we need better public science. And that means we need more funding for public science projects. And that probably means, to your point, that we need some governmental action around specifically the National Science Foundation. Sorry, listeners, you've heard me bring this up a whole bunch, but if you've heard it multiple times and you haven't contacted your elected representatives about it, now would maybe be a good time, especially if you have a congressperson who sits on like a science committee in the House. Or the Senate. If you have a senator who sits on a science committee, those people are important. And then within the academic community, this is something I'd like to ask you about. I would imagine that there must be some kind of communication with the NSF, with the National Science Foundation, from academia for scientists to say, look, we really need a field study support for this. You know, we need like a category of grants for which we can apply to research UAP. Do you know anything about that? Is that something scientists can do?
I don't know a lot about the status of that. I know that there are some very brave and intelligent scientists out there now who are engaging with the UFO UAP topic and seeking the funding for it. I'm not at all sure that the NSF or any other entity is being very forthcoming with funding, especially at the present moment.
Yeah, I think we need to apply pressure there. And I think we're going to get more results from the NSF than we are from the CIA.
Well, yes.
So to this other point that you made about sort of perceiving the phenomenon differently, I just want to draw that in a little more clearly for people. Imagine, I'm going to guess where you're coming from a little bit here has to do with high strangeness stuff. Okay, so there are nuts and bolts reports where like something leaves an indentation or breaks a tree branch or burns an arm or something. But there are also many aspects to experience or reports or sightings that veer into what you might call like the spiritual kind of experience. People
or
use
psychic,
this word. Go ahead.
Psychic phenomena, spiritual. Yeah.
Precognition. This word imaginal pops up in this space. I think I've heard you use it.
Yeah.
Would you like to explain that word a little bit for people?
Aspect, as I understand it, it's an aspect of reality that in which the imagination functions in a very powerful way. But that doesn't mean that it's imaginary. It doesn't mean that it's not true, not real, not intersubjectively verifiable. It just means that our consciousness, the way we think of things, how we think of things, plays a more marked role than what we typically notice in our day-to-day material lives.
Yeah, so to make a concrete example in this airy-fairy space, if you were to have a dream and contact and felt like you were in the presence of somebody who was speaking with you, whether they were like a non-human being or a spirit of some kind, maybe somebody you knew, and you really felt like this was different from a regular dream, it was actually a conversation between you and another mind, that could be a potential example of an imaginal experience, which is to say it's happening in an imagination space, but it is not imaginary, as you said.
There are a lot of people who say that that's what happens when we dream. That that's where dream events occur. And I've been watching my dreams for quite a number of years now, and I noticed that my dreams have a topography. They have my dreamscape. It's got a shape. It's got buildings and streets and locations and people. And I think of that as an imaginal world. It's not real in the same sense that me here talking to you is real, but it's still very real in its own way.
Yeah, it's extremely challenging to think about that difference and that sameness. Like how in what sense could something sort of psychic, spiritual, imaginal be real and yet distinct from imaginary explorations where you just daydream or something?
Yeah. I'm not a guru. I'm sure if we can find a guru, they could probably give us some good guidance. But
maybe, yeah. It could be.
Yeah.
It could be that there's ancient wisdom. It could be that we are just in an area here that we really don't understand yet. And I mostly took us into this part of the conversation to explore a little bit what you meant when you said there might be some like broader worlds we need to understand to get a sense of what's going on.
Well, have I shared my image of image of reality with you?
No, I don't think so. Let's do it. It sounds great.
In previous years, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I thought of reality as this is where we are. This is the trees outside my window and the books on your shelf and the microphones and the computer. This is reality. And then every once in a while, we get a bubble. It's like that intrudes into our reality, and we call it, oh, that's a Sasquatch. That's a near-death experience. Oh my goodness, that's a ghost. Oh my goodness, I think I saw a fairy. So there's all these things that they seem to come in, and I thought reality is like a glass of 7-Up. We are the liquid. You and me, we are engaging right now. We are in the liquid, and all these bubbles that are the psychic phenomena and other, strange phenomena that don't seem to, you're not here with us, but they're not quite the same as us. They keep popping and rising up in our reality. I have recently shifted that image. I am now beginning to suspect that reality is the psychic, the Sasquatch, the UFO, the near-death experience, the ghost, the fairy. That is reality. And that it's us that are the bubbles in the 7-Up. We are in a bubble floating up through the 7-Up of reality. And whenever whenever a boundary between us and that reality becomes permeable, it comes through. I think we're the limited ones now. I used to think that we were in the larger reality and these other things were limited. Now it's the opposite. I think the other things may truly be reality and they occupy reality. And we're the ones in the bubble.
It's interesting. We spoke when we did our pre-chat about this idea that the animal kingdom is filled with different kinds of sensory perception. And what you were just making me think of is we know that ultraviolet light and ultrasonic sounds occupy the same world we live in, but we don't perceive them even though they're here. And there are many, many phenomena that fit that bill.
Yes.
They're here. We're interacting with them daily, but we don't notice them. We're not evolutionarily adapted to notice them. We're evolutionarily adapted to see what we need to see for our model of biology to work.
That's right.
So it stands to reason that if we are in relation to other beings that have different evolutionary backgrounds, like other animals on our planet, or potentially cryptid type beings who have even more different biological backgrounds, or potentially extraterrestrials or sort of like non-local beings who are from another part of reality, that those beings might experience the world differently than we do. And our interactions with them might therefore feel to us sometimes like we're entering into imaginary territory because we're experiencing parts of reality that we don't think of as generically real in a normal sense because we don't walk around perceiving them. So does that sound like we've kind of summed up some of the challenge of interacting with the space?
Yeah, that's what they say about the Jinn. The concept of the Jinn that existed in the Arab world and was written into the worldview of the Islamic tradition in the scriptures and in their traditional sayings.
In case anybody's not following this is like what Western people would call genies, but kind of, but DJIN, and the jinn are spiritual creatures in the Islamic tradition, and they have a different sort of character than some of the like Christian and Judaic spiritual creatures like angels and demons.
Right.
Would you like to explain a little more?
Well,
I'm so interested to hear what you've learned about Jinn.
Christianity and Judaism have largely divided the divine and non-material world into there's the deity, and then there's angels, and then the not so nice angels, which we call demons or devils. You notice that those beings, according to the mythology of the Christian tradition, they're the same being. What we're commenting on by calling them angels or demons, we're commenting on their moral nature, not their physical or perceptual nature.
Okay, that's interesting. You already just blew my mind a little bit there. I had never thought of that. I guess, of course, that classically Lucifer is a fallen angel in Christian tradition.
Right. Well, in the Arab world within which Islam grew up, there was, as there is in many places around the world, a tradition of a third category of being. There are the divine beings who are supernatural. And then there's everyday reality that we live in and eat and breathe and work. But there's an intermediate realm that's in between. It's not material, but it can be. It can appear in our material reality, but it's not exactly divine. It's an intermediate plane where there are life forms. One of those life forms is what they call the jinn. And when you look at the descriptions of the jinn, you say, "Oh yeah, I've heard people with UFO encounters say that the entities did this, and oh yeah, they did that." There's a very close parallel. And so it has been fruitful for me to imagine the what if. What if these ancient human traditions about this third level of reality, or this in-between level, are accurate? What if it's not imagination? It's historical fact that may have been embellished and embroidered over the centuries, but at the core of it, there is some historical encounter with something real that happened. And I think the jinn certainly qualify as that. And the jinn are, the term jinn actually means hidden, because they're hidden from our sight. We can't see them. I wouldn't be at all surprised if, right now there weren't a jinn or two somewhere around my house here and around your office going, look at that, they're talking about us. We can't see them.
Do you, in your reading, I'm curious what you're reading. Like, are you reading the Hadith? Like, are you reading the Quran? Like, are you reading books about those things and works about jinn in particular, or jinn?
Well, I call them jinn. Other people call them jinn. In my old age, I'm finding that pronunciation matters less to me than it ever did.
That seems wise.
Yes. Right now, I'm actually reading a book about the history of science and the decline of the humanities in the West, in Western thought. I'm reading a book about the gods, and called The Silence of the Gods. The question being, did paganism disappear when Christianity or the monotheistic traditions in general gained ascendance in the West? What happened to paganism? Did it just disappear, or did it just go, what about all the gods? Did it just go quiet? And a book that specifically focuses on the fairies. I have been reading a lot about the jinn, simply because for my purposes, that's good enough. I don't have the training or the skills to go back and look at the entire Quran or the Hadith or anything like that. So I'm relying on scholars who do have that training to tell me about these topics. I've read a lot. I mean, I've got, the 40 or 50 entries in my bibliography just on the jinn.
Wow. Well, can you tell us a little bit about their general qualities? Like, do they tend to be mischievous? Do they tend to be cunning? Is there some overlap with fairy type archetypes?
I've actually begun to make a chart comparing Jinn with other kinds of entities that people in different places in the world throughout history have said these other entities exist. The Jinn tend to be hidden. They can appear to us to where humans can see them when they wish to, but then they disappear boop, in the blink of an eye. They move incredibly fast. They're shapeshifters. Let's see. I'm looking at my list here.
When they do appear, do they tend to appear as people who they're nearby, or do they tend to appear like some kind of angel creature? Or
it depends. Whatever they want.
Okay.
To appear as. One of my dogs laying here could be a Jinn. They say that dogs sometimes take the shape of, try again. The Jinn sometimes take the shape of dogs or serpents, but they appear as humans. They appear as anything. I don't think my dogs are Jinn, but in theory, that's possible. But they are tricksters, maybe my dogs are Jinn, come think about it. They seem to delight in kind of tricking the stupid humans and making us look foolish. When they appear, they can appear in whatever shape they wish, and they can appear selectively. You and I can be in a crowded room, and you and I will see a Jinn, and nobody else in the room sees them.
Mm.
Or they can appear when everybody in the room would see them. Apparently it's their choice.
And that does overlap with some UFO encounters. Right. Sure. Right. Among the most challenging reports, somebody saw something that somebody with them did not see.
Yep. They can produce illusions. And there have been many cases of UFO close encounters where the witness is hard pressed to figure out, was this real or did I just imagine it? This is an illusion? This was happening and then this other thing was happening, and was one of those things an illusion? It's hard to know. If you're trying to understand what the Jinn are, and in their own right, they can be good or evil. They have powers of engaging with our physical universe that are greater than what humans can manage, at least at the current level time. And so the advice usually is to be cautious about interacting with them, because you can really get pulled in. But some of them are good. Some of them are, fine folk you'd like to have next door, and others are, you wouldn't want to meet them in a dark alley or even on a well-lighted street.
And to your earlier point about angels and demons, Jinn come from a tradition that also includes those creatures, yes. Right? So they would be, within at least the Islamic tradition, considered independent from like another kind of entity than angels/demons, right?
That's right. That's right. I think there is some debate among Islamic scholars as to whether the original evil Jinn, Iblis, it was his name, is thereby became a demon. And some scholars say no, the Jinn are an entirely separate species of beings. Angels are another species of beings. And Iblis, but then the question is Iblis, was he an angel? Was he a Jinn?
And you said earlier, just to underline this, that you think, at least in some traditions, angels and demons are considered the same kind of being, but with different behaviors. Did I understand that right?
If you were to think of their traits, what they can and can't do, if you were to think of it kind of imaginally physiologically, they are the same species of being, but of very different moral quality, very different character.
Can I ask? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, are there any abduction type things, stories around Jinn? Because I know Jacques Vallée, in Passport to Magonia chronicled many instances of folklore overlapping with UFO reports. Like there are a lot of old fairy stories, for example, that basically sound like UFO abduction experiences. Like these little creatures took me to a round metal room and they poked and prodded me, etc. So I'm curious, are there any stories that involve Jinn that sound like UFO abduction encounters to you?
I have read a few, yes. So it does happen, just as the stories about the fairies in at least Western Europe and the British Isles. Yes.
And what were the overlaps? Sorry to interrupt.
No, the overlaps are just really, really strong, which surprised me. I had read about the fairies before, but when I went back and reread and then looked at the material on the Jinn, almost everything that I've said about the fairy, about the Jinn, applies just as well to the fairies. But there's also the issue of if you're going to do an ethnography about the inhabitants of this other level of reality, I think there may be a variety of types of inhabitants, but one type would be the Jinn. The Jinn may be very similar to the fairies. They may be essentially the same kind of entity, but just as human species, we're all humans, but we have different physiological characteristics depending on our deep ancestral history, the environment where we evolved.
I see.
And so we have different propensities for skin color, hair color, eye color,
height, land speed.
Land speed, yeah. So there's, and I think that it is probably, this is what I'm trying to suss out for myself right now, is if this third level of reality exists, if that could be the arena from which UFOs come, and if Jinn could be behind this activity. What's the nature of these entities? What are they like as a species? How have they interacted? But not just the Jinn. I'm trying to figure out if it's just the West. It seems to me that it could be very much a quirk of Western deep history and thought and the folklore and traditions that we have kind of woven into the fabric of our societies and cultures. So I'm trying to look around the world to look at other types of entities that people have believed in, to say they're not really quite deities, or if they're deities, they seem to have magical powers. Mm-hmm. And so we think of them as deities because they can do things for us that we can't do. On the other hand, they're not really the ultimate deity. They're not really truly deities. That's a whole different class of being living, operating in a different part of reality. And then there's human beings that is still another physical, corporeal beings that are another class of reality.
Possibly with some spiritual elements that we don't necessarily understand. Like if
that seems likely. And how that all fits together, that's kind of why I tend to think that we're the bubble in the 7-Up. It's not that we're the 7-Up and the bubbles just kind of happen. It's that we're the bubbles in the 7-Up.
Yeah. I remember learning this idea about conceiving of a larger reality. I don't remember exactly how this person described it, but she was talking about I was talking with Dr. Tanya Searle, who has researched Indigenous Australian beliefs, and she was talking about embracing a view of a larger reality, like a super reality in the sense that there's more here than we are aware of. And that does feel very much like what we're getting at. It also has really interesting implications for science because it means if this is real, it means we're missing something like right in front of us. And we're very proud of having noticed ultraviolet light.
Right.
But this would be a whole new aspect of reality. And I think probably a lot of physicists have kind of a hard time with it for that reason. Like they understand that there are gaps in the model, not there yet with quantum mechanics, but the idea that we could be missing so much that like literal beings, like creatures, a whole biology that we don't understand is like is right here intersecting our reality, maybe in a different relationship to time and physical space. That's a lot to swallow. And certainly it opens up a lot of questions in terms of just like the physics of the situation. What does that imply about the nature of the universe on a material level?
Well, I think that material level thing is exactly what is going to have to be called into question in a more profound way than it yet has. And I understand quantum mechanics and all this just kind of throws the whole idea of what is material kind of out the window. You know, the kitchen table is mostly empty space, and yet to me it's solid. No, it's scary. I think that what we need to do, where we need to go with the study of UFOs, is in the direction of figuring out this other, what Jacques Vallée called Magonia. The term wasn't original to him, but he found it in the Christian tradition and appropriated it, rationally to describe this middle area. And if it does exist, what kind of beings are there? How have we interacted with them? One of the things that I've also discovered lately in the last couple of years is that research into human neuroanatomy and neurobiology indicates that humans have a propensity to react to certain kinds of stimuli with awe or worship. And I'm suspecting that encounters, just as we have encounters today with the UFO reality, from whatever kind of reality that may be, it's been here for a very long time. It's not a recent phenomenon. And I have a feeling that humans, as we have evolved, have encountered this other reality from time to time, tended to worship it, to venerate it. And whether the entities that we encountered encouraged that, demanded it, or whether it was just kind of like what humans do. I mean, talk about evolutionary survival advantage. What is the evolutionary survival advantage of responding to certain kinds of stimuli with awe? What is the advantage that gives us? And I don't know what the answer is yet. I'm still puzzling on that one. But the fact that, as far as I can tell, it's possible that a significant share of our religious ideas and traditions may have originated with early experiences, encounters with the entities from this other realm, is not to deny that there is a proper deity, not to deny that the spiritual approach or outlook is misplaced, that we shouldn't do that. I think we're hardwired to do it. But I think we need to take a long, hard look at the direction in which that tendency that we have has been exercised. And I don't think the human species is ready to do that yet. I don't think speaking of maturity, I don't think that as a species we're mature enough to be able to handle. Ironically enough, it may be some of the more indigenous and aboriginal societies with the worldview that you were describing, this worldview where the supernatural and the preternatural are all around us. It engages with us. If we do certain things, we can sometimes engage with it at will. They might have a better handle on how to think about and work with this other realm, this third realm, that could give us some guidance on how to think about it while maintaining some sense of feeling toward some kind of higher power that truly is not just I mean, that truly is what we would think of as divine. I certainly trust that such a power does exist and that all of these other manifestations are a part of the order that highest power, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao, that classic saying from Taoism, from the Tao Te Ching.
I think it's the very first line.
Yeah, exactly. It really orients you right there. Whatever this higher force is, the Tao, it is impossible to be named. But I think humanity may have been making an understandable error by naming it and worshiping it. When things that are sufficiently shocking and surprising and powerful, we encounter them, it's kind of hardwired into us to respond with feelings of awe and wonder and worship, veneration.
This is really interesting. I want to fold in a couple layers here. One, to this point about maturity, I think you're proposing challenges for both the religious and the non-religious community here. One way to say that, I think, is if there are some beings here who are basically morally like us, but spiritually and physically different, it sounds like what you're proposing is that we should, in some sense, consider ourselves in relation to them a little more equally, maybe like stop venerating them quite so much.
Absolutely.
And you're being careful to say that doesn't necessarily mean we're the highest level, that you can sort of conceive of a God type thing or like an all powerful source or like a highest level of moral reality or energetic truth or something. And certainly I wanted to say many of the places where I've read about spiritual beings have included an idea of sort of stacked realities that graduate to a God type tier that's like all love and light and everything is everything up there. And if you can see and connect with that truth, you're part of it all. But there might be interesting layers in between. And sort of a side note there, I find it really interesting to think about multiple layers. Like we're talking about just thinking about one new layer, like, okay, recognizing one kind of ultraviolet light, but it could be that the Jinn operate on one level and then the angels are on a whole different level and they're archangels above that or something. There could be multiple planes.
Well, multiple planes or subdivisions within these multiple planes. I mean, we just don't know. We really don't know, which is why looking at our human traditions, religious traditions, folklore, myths, to see if we can figure out if these were not just stories, if these were not just invented stories to make a moral point, if these were based in some kind of experience. What can we say about the behavior of all the parties in this narrative? How do we get to understand, like an ethnography, to do an ethnography of our folklore, of our religious traditions. And that means an ethnography of the entities that we have encountered. And if they are indeed entities, I don't know if they want to have a relationship with us beyond what they've got right now.
Yeah, that very much takes me to a next question. If it's okay, I'd like to pick up on that. But first, parenthetically, I want to say that project of ethnography, our cultural ethnography, is fascinating. And then the biological project of potentially mapping a family or families of entities that we can't normally perceive, but sometimes interact with, is fascinating. And then there's a physics project for that.
Yes.
What are these entities made of? Where do they exist? And the phrase that floated up for me while I was thinking about that was dark biology. Maybe we needed dark biology to match and overlap with our ideas of dark energy and dark matter, which, as far as we know, is most of the universe. I love the calculations. So, there seems like plenty of room at the bottom or over to the sides, so to speak. But okay, now I want to get to this communication question that you raised, because it's just as interesting, in fact, arguably more interesting, that these beings have not publicly communicated with us, if they in fact have been here for thousands of years. Like if we've been in relationship to them for the whole of human civilization, then it just gets weirder and weirder with each passing century that we haven't publicly established their reality and that they have not decided to make that apparent, because it would seem that they would have that ability if they chose, based on the other abilities they seem to have. And that's a problem just in the extraterrestrial hypothesis world. If you're thinking about just aliens visiting after nuclear explosions start,
right,
and they're sneaking around and they're kind of getting an eye out on our activities, and they're basically trying to get a handle on humanity, maybe, and without making themselves too apparent. You have to ask why they haven't made themselves apparent. I think there are some believable answers there. Like they wouldn't want to scare us. They don't want to interfere. They don't want us to attack them. They want to maybe control us. All of those explanations seem like they're potentially applicable going back thousands of years. But I'm curious, why do you think these beings are avoiding public confirmation of their existence, if you think they have been avoiding that? And B, do you think part of our maturity, our graduation here, might involve requiring some kind of public discourse, some kind of formal relationship that goes beyond just those of us by the campfire or alone in our bedrooms relating to these beings?
I don't know if we can have, I think it would be healthy for the human species to start having discussions about these entities, this other reality, even if it has to be on a provisional basis, to be able to wrap our heads around the changing of how we conceptualize reality and everything that's in reality. I think we can have those conversations among ourselves. I don't know if we're mature enough as a species to do it, but we could. As for the entities, I would think that they would be fascinated by the human achievement of the science and the technology that we currently have, at least at, in its highest and best expressions. But they may have a long game, and we may be in the middle of what's their long game. Eventually they will seek to have that kind of relationship with us, perhaps. But right now, it sure seems like they aren't interested in doing anything big and formal. As Jacques Vallée pointed out, they seem to be operating at a more cultural, social level, psychological level with the human species. To what end is the question. And I'm not sure that religious veneration, I'm not sure that's their plan. I'm not sure that's what they're after. In point of fact, it may be that on the basis of millennia ago, having had interactions with human beings, they may have, and becoming the objects of veneration and myths and legends, they may have thought, well, okay, that's, we'd love to be able to talk with these people, but we really, every time they see us, they keep growing up, keep maturing. One day we'll get there. We'll help them along if we can. I don't know. I'm speculating here. I have no real idea, but I'm not sure that they want to.
Yeah, it seems like they don't want to, because they probably could if they wanted to. Two things for this to collide with are the crash materials. I'd love for us to just face the music on that. Think about what it means for some physical objects to be in the world. Apparently, technological objects. And I've forgotten the second one, so I'll come back around to it.
Okay.
Let's just bounce off that for a second.
My brain only holds one thing at a time anyway, so we're good. I've struggled with that too. The only thing, there are some well-informed researchers in the larger UFO community who have said that it is obvious, and it is obvious, that whatever this is seems to, as Jacques Vallée said, punch a hole in our reality, in our space-time reality. They just punch a hole in it. This is where it becomes hard to wrap your mind around how something could be immaterial and paranormal, and at the same time have a physical quality to it that can be captured. under certain circumstances. And I'm not sure what the circumstances are. But some authorities on the Jinn say yes, that at times, the Jinn are very long-lived, very, very long. They live much longer than humans, according to the scuttlebutt in the Islamic tradition.
Okay.
But they do die.
Huh. Interesting.
And so it's possible, springing off of that, it is possible that the barrier between physical reality and non-physical reality is much thinner than we think it is. And when something appears in physical reality and becomes damaged here, it's kind of like stuck here. It doesn't just disappear. It doesn't just vanish back into the other reality. It would seem to suggest that there is a continuity of some kind between the other, wherever this reality is they've come from, and the material reality that we know as our everyday world. There seems to be some kind of continuity. Our science, our physics isn't at the place yet where we can put a name to that. But that may be the next phase of our scientific growth, is to be able to figure that out and put a name to it.
I wonder if you might like this idea. I heard somebody express a theory about the spiritual and physical overlap, hypothesizing basically that UAP are spirit submarines would be this idea. So sometimes you hear people who are talking about planes of reality use the word vibration to describe them. I'm not sure if that has like a great physics application in a real sense, but just take it for what it is. Maybe these beings live on different planes of vibration. That's how some people who are deep in the psychic community conceive of the subject. So then one possible idea would be a being of higher vibration might need a technological device to descend to an area, a part of reality of lower vibration, in the same way that we need a submarine to descend into the ocean. That would be one potential hypothesis about why there might be a physical element in our reality, but yet also a spiritual, relationship to these beings in some way.
Yeah, I like I've never heard that term before, but that resonates. That sounds very much like, the case.
Thought you might enjoy that.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I thought of the other thing that I wanted to confront, which is what I bump on primarily when I think about these things, potentially these beings being really old, is that the only model we have for what a highly advanced, highly intelligent, powerful species does when it reaches the top of the food chain is us. And we just take over everything. We just destroy whatever we want. We run the world. We multiply. We fill up every nook and cranny. And to some extent, we have models of that on a larger sense from just like life itself. Like life seems to want to do that wherever it can, expand and grow and fill all the opportunities. So the question that poses for me is why these powerful beings wouldn't do that if they could, if they've been around for thousands of years. Why are we not living in their civilization, I guess, is the question. And it's a harder problem, I think, for the theory of like ancient, highly powered civilizations that then stuck around in some remnant capacity. I don't understand why we wouldn't see them trying to build back, trying to dominate. And one thought that leads me to is the potential that in some sense they do, and we just don't notice that. So there, I think of like a beekeeping relationship. Like we don't muck around in our beehives normally in ways that they notice most of the time. Every now and then we go in there. But for the most part, we just keep our bees. We're not interacting with them daily, but we're still in charge. Yeah. And there are many more of them than each individual beekeeper. So what do you think about that?
I think that's certainly one model somewhat of how to think about this thing. But another model, I mean, we have the colonial model. We have the beekeeping model. But what if they don't overtly colonialize us, because our welfare and their welfare are intimately tied together. Dogs and humans. The feminist theoretician Donna Haraway talks about dogs being companion species. We are engaged in mutual companionship, the species of dog and the species of human. We have been shaping each other's evolution and development for a very long time. What if this is the same thing with us and these entities? What if we are implicated in their welfare in ways that we are not able to understand at the moment, and they are implicated in ours? We are tied together in a companionate type of relationship, whether the humans are aware of it or not, perhaps.
It's very interesting. Maybe as a way out here, a big place to land or to stare off into the distance, I'd love to ask you about what your kind of cosmic vision of this situation is. Have you found any kind of hints in your reading that suggest these beings and beings like them are essentially in some fundamental way local to Earth? Or conversely, does it feel to you like they live in a plane that maybe doesn't relate to space and time in a way where that question makes sense? Like they might be sort of from everywhere, and or does it? How does this intersect for you with the idea of literal physical visitors coming from other parts of the physical world? Would you imagine that there might be like fairies and Jinn on Alpha Centauri that were local natives there, or would you imagine that the sort of plane of spiritual reality sort of hops between Alpha Centauri and Earth in a quicker way where travel is not the same? How do you feel about any of that?
Well, I have wondered about this. If we listen to what the Islamic tradition tells us about the jinn, Allah created the jinn first to be keepers of the earth, and that kind of went belly up for various reasons. And so God ultimately decided to create human beings to be keepers of the earth. And the jinn were made to be on the earth and to watch it. And now they are, well, in some traditions, they are supposedly here to help us. In others, they are here to tempt us and lead us astray. But they are still, it's like your post. If you are guarding Hadrian's Wall in the United Kingdom, and there were guard posts every so often in the wall, and your post was to be stationed at that guard post, and that's where you stayed. Even if new soldiers came in, you stayed there. So it could be, if that model of being caretakers of Earth and potentially of each other, if that model is correct, it could be that it's really in our near Earth environment that these other species live. I don't know how far out that would extend. That's a question, and I have no answers for it. It's one of those things to be determined. But it is also possible that, and here we get back to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that this reality this third level of reality extend as far as any other level does, such that on Alpha Centauri there may be essentially the same species as the jinn and the fae folk and all of this, that God knows what they would call them on Alpha Centauri. God knows what kind of relationship, if there are physical entities in Alpha Centauri, then God knows what relationship they might have to these entities. But there's no reason why both physical creatures, corporeal creatures like you and me, at least in the flesh, and this other form of living conscious entity couldn't exist throughout the universe, both, and be entangled with one another and implicated on other planets and other solar systems. And the process of talking about communication and travel between those, to us, physically distant places and here could have a lot of intersecting and crisscrossing lines of contact and communication, which is a real long-winded way of saying, gee, I don't know.
Well, it's really fun to think about. And also one idea that floated up for me there, just in the process of exploring that wildness, is the possibility that, to your earlier point about some symbiotic relationship, I had never thought about this, but in asking myself, if there were an empty, barren planet, would there be Jinn and fairies? Could there be? And one answer is maybe. Maybe they live in like the forces of nature and they're physical elements.
It could be
like wind and fire.
Yep.
But another potential answer is that they relate to conscious entities in a symbiotic way that relates to this concept of imaginal existence that we were visiting earlier. Maybe they are, in some sense, like imaginary friends that are real, that need conscious hosts to exist at all. And then they exist in relationship on that sort of symbiotic spiritual plane. That was just a new concept for me. I thought it might be fun.
Yeah. What if consciousness itself involves them? We think of consciousness being located in the brain, but I think a lot of people, including many scientists, have decided that that's, it is certainly mediated through the brain, but it's not an epiphenomenon of the brain.
Yeah, we may be at a really interesting turning point there.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, are you reading Dan Brown's Secret of Secrets? I've been reading this book and it heavily focuses on that question and the science around it. So yeah, it's worth a pickup as somebody who thinks about this stuff.
Yeah, cool.
So would you say that you are leaning in that direction toward like maybe a panpsychist model or some other model like that where consciousness is fundamental and the brain is more like a receiver of consciousness than a generator?
Yeah, that seems logically correct to me. I will say that on an experiential level, I lack experiences in my life that make me have more certainty. But in terms of being what logically seems to be correct, that's it.
Wow, we're in for like 11 revolutions at once here when humanity cracks all these oysters open.
Yep.
We're going to be dining for the next 100 years on all our discoveries.
We are going to be, it'll be a long time figuring it out. But this is why I think this is the period that we're in. I think we're in the beginning of what I call the scientific Reformation.
Nice.
Like the Protestant Reformation for the Christian church in the West. It reshaped the face of Christianity in important ways. And I think that's probably where we're at in terms of science. We're in the beginnings of a scientific reformation. And when that reformation is done, we will have learned how to incorporate this other realm, these other types of consciousness and entities and life in a wider angle view of reality than what we currently have.
Well, thank you so much for exploring these wide-ranging topics with us today and this deeply unknown but magical world. I'd like to point people to your presentation for the Society for UAP Studies, I think last year. And also you did an interview with Kim Engels, who we spoke with, and she's great. I thought you had a great conversation, so people could find both of those.
Thank you.
To hear more from you. Is there anywhere else you like people to go find you? They can check out your book on Amazon, Lure of the Edge.
I cannot think of anything at the moment. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today, and it's amazing. It's like teaching. You learn a lot when you're the teacher. When you get interviewed, you learn things about what you think and how they connect that you didn't even really have formulated into words before. So it's been very useful for me. Thank you.
Oh, that's so great. To the power of conversation and the joy. Thank you so much, Brenda. I really had a wonderful time speaking with you.
Thanks. Me too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And that's the show. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying it, please like and subscribe and share this with people who you think might like it. You could also directly support us at patreon.com/WTUFO for $1 a month. We do some chatting in there, and you can propose questions for future episodes. You could also check out spacefair.etsy.com. That's our company's main merch site where you could support us commercially and pick up some cool gear. Thank you again for listening. Hope you have a lovely day.